Okay, good evening stream. Good evening everybody. Welcome to the stream. And I need to change the stream title. Which I've just remembered to do. Why I always remember just after I start a stream, I don't know. But there we go. Hopefully that's not too bad. Right, scraperboard. Gloves. Tools I'll get out in a minute. I'm going to take an easy way out of doing this as well. But a piece of scraperboard, nice clean hands. Shiny piece of scraperboard. Put things away. I shall adjust the camera somewhat as well. I'm going to have to do something about that light. I wonder if I can bounce it off the wall a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Makes me a bit dark, but you can't have everything. If I put it down there shining up at me, it will blind me, so you can't have that. Now then. I am going to take the easy way out of doing this. Because I'm going to trace an image. And I'm going to do it in white. And I'm going to do it of a cottage. That reference image that you see on the left. So yeah, about there will do. Masking tape comes in useful for all sorts of things. I'm just going to use it to stick that down on there, because then I know roughly where the board is and the paper is. And I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to mark where everything is. Fear Reaper 7, good evening and welcome to the studio this evening. Holocall, also welcome to the studio this evening. Nice to see you both again. I noticed your very last comment as well, Fear Reaper, talking about cute nurses. Right, so this is roughly a cottage. I'm just using it to get an outline. She'll give us something to work with. Rather than spending hours drawing the thing out by hand. And so yes, I am using an existing image. But you can see roughly how accurate I'm being, and especially when the paper moves. we might as well put the roughly where the path goes in, something like that. And that's probably all I need to do. Let's have a look. Have I got that actually come through? There we go. I think that's good enough. See, silver lining in everything, Fear Reaper. I would say every time I've been in hospital, I've been kind of too bothered about sort of feeling ill, like the first time with the migraine headaches. The only thing I wanted was a real lot of painkillers. And I didn't care nor notice who gave me them. Dear. Anyway, so that's incidentally, if you're wondering what I was using, it's not carbon paper, it's similar Sorel paper, which is really good for quite a lot of things. It sticks to quite a bit of material, doesn't stain it, it doesn't contain wax, and it's really good for doing things like this. I've used it on wood, used it on scraperboard, I've used it on glass. It seems to stick to most things. Right. Actually, I suppose what I should have also done before I started the stream was get some tools out. And it'd probably help if I put tools away as well. We're still getting reflections off that light, aren't we? I have to see what I can do about. It's really hard. Lighting is really hard. Kind of really need a giant reflector and a uplighter, but there's no way I'm putting the big uplighter on, which is just over there. That's a 350 watt light. It's warm and I ain't putting a big heater on. We'll see how that goes. Gets a bit dark in. Let me see if I can just adjust it a little bit, get rid of a little bit more of the glare. Huh, that makes it worse. That's clever. Where's that? Is that glare coming from here? Yes, it is, and a bit off the window. I hate this light. I hate lighting altogether, to be honest. Yeah, no problem. Evening, Eddie Volgai. Nice to see you again. So you're getting some off the windows, but not much. You're getting some off the overhead lights. You're stuck with it, guys. Yeah, stuck with it. I can't do anything more about the lighting. I'm afraid. I just can't. I can't get rid of the glare that you're seeing. This stuff is shiny, and that's what you're seeing. It's reflecting absolutely everything. Reflecting off the monitor. Okay. The only way I'd do anything about it is to get an easel out and a board, and I don't have the space for it, I'm afraid, at the moment. So we'll just have to deal with it. It is. So gloves. Time for gloves. The idea of the gloves is these are cotton gloves, so it stops any oils coming off my fingers. Doesn't stop dust coming off these, but it stops any oils coming off my fingers. Yeah, I will do. And making finger marks on this board. So let's just clean it down a little bit. There we go. Right, I'm almost certainly not going to use that tool. Scraperboard tools for scraping on scraperboard. You can use anything that's sharp, basically. You can get tools for it. I won't say specially designed; they're just sharp tools. This one's a bit like a rake. I don't know if you can see, it's 4 points. Acts like a rake, so you do 4 lines in one go. We've got one here, looks like a gouge, works like a gouge, can also be used vertically and twist it to create circles. Probably not going to use that either. To start with, this one is like a really wide scraping blade. Obviously you can see it's got a wide end. You can also use a tip, of course. So it's rather like just a knife of that shape, so it creates really wide lines. Potentially you can actually use it to half scrape off the black, but that's quite hard. So you can use it to create like a grey effect without using cross-hatching techniques. And then we have 2 pointy tools, one more pointy than the other. So this one creates quite wide lines, this one creates quite fine scratchy lines. You should try etching. The only etching that I'm aware of is like copper etching, which would be an acid bath. So coat something like copper with wax and then scrape the wax off and then stick it in acid. Yeah, we got heavy rain probably about an hour ago, or no, 2 hours ago, and then it disappeared. Okay, alright, Free Reaper. Other than circuit boards, I haven't done etching since I was at school 30 odd years ago. But I made a chessboard. Great big, I think it was 18-inch square sheet of copper. And made, waxed it, took wax out of the squares, and then etched that, which is quite interesting. because it was too big to go in the school's etch bath, so I had to make an etch bath, which is fairly easy. It's just a dirty great big sheet of polythene in a box. But it took about 3 or 4 hours to get the wax off. If I'd have thought about it before I started, I'd have covered the whole thing in tape, cut the squares and then taken the tape off, and then put wax over the top and then took the remaining tape off. That would have saved me a lot of work, because once you scrape when you scrape the wax off, you have to keep scraping the wax off to make sure you get all the wax off. Otherwise you left yourself with little marks on the stuff you're supposed to be etching out. Anyway, right, so I've got a reference picture which you can see. I've got a rough layout here that you can see, and I'm looking at that going, where do I start? I have absolutely no idea. Where to start? Well, it's a thatched roof, I guess, so maybe we start with a thatched roof. That in theory should be easy. You notice I mentioned the word theory. Okay. Alright, we'll make this up as we go along. I might regret doing it this way, but we shall see. It's interesting. I don't know if anybody's ever seen thatched roofs being done, but it's amazing how thick they are. When they're new, that is. They settle quite a lot over their lifetime. So they're going from like being almost a few feet thick, down to not very much at all. Which surprised me when I first saw it. See, I said I watched all sorts of weird things sometimes. Not sure whether this is going to look like thatch or not, but you notice I'm doing this on an A4 board as well, so it's I did it half this size before, so I don't know if this is going to turn out to be a good idea or not. Grabbing a smoke. Smoking, nah. What are the gloves for? The gloves are there to stop me getting fingerprints on the board. Skin oils will put fingerprints all over it, and rather than try and keep claying it down after the fact, it's easy not to get them there in the first place. So these are just cotton gloves. And the other thing they do, being cotton gloves, I can't scratch it with my fingernails or a ring or anything like that, so it's just there to protect the board, really. I've just noticed this is a little bit out of focus, isn't it? That was focused for something else earlier. I'm not dropping frames at the moment, AD. That looks better. I do have stream delay turned down. I guess, mind you, I'm not sure if I change that whether I need to restart the stream, so don't especially want to do that at the moment. Because I don't like idiots that put things in like that. And if you need to advertise, it isn't very good. Now, it strikes me that I probably want to use a thicker scraping for this. Because it's quite light, quite wide bands of colour when you look at the reference. But I can always put them over the top of this, and this will then produce like an under shading, under colouring. I seem to have a preference also for working with a fine tool like this rather than some of the thicker tools. I can then adjust the brightness or by how many lines I scrape into a particular area. Yeah, it was well, short and sharp, Holocaust. Seems to have stopped for now. I'm assuming you mean the buffering 84 guy rather than the stream. At least I'm hoping you mean that, but need to be a little bit careful I don't create kind of lines. Whilst when thatched roofs are made, there is quite often lots of lines in it. As it ages, they basically vanish as the edges of the reeds get broken off and dried out. Yeah, I did kind of guess that. probably find me dotting all over the place on here. I don't really know how I want to do it. So I'll probably just try bits and pieces out. When I'm not sure what I'm doing, when I know what I'm doing, I'll tend to start at one side or one place and work my way from there. When I'm not sure, I'll tend to dot about and fill bits in just to see what it looks like, and once I sort of get the picture of what I want to do, then I'll start working on it more consistently from one particular place. So I just decided I'd put a little bit of brickwork in. It's more sort of stonework, not brickwork, but fairly large stones, which is a good thing from the point of view of it's going to go quite quickly. I don't know whether I'm going to put stones in everywhere or just a few like here. I'm sort of looking at the reference, but having looked at the reference and decided there's a couple of big rocks here, I probably won't do much more than that in respect to doing what's on the reference. We had the outline and we've got a rough idea where there's some nice looking stones, but that's about all I'm going to do with it. Now then, I need, because I'm moving this around, I'm going to need to move things out of the way, like these rings from earlier on. You might not think that an A4 board needs that much space, but when you start moving it around, it's amazing how much room you take up. So I shall endeavour not to do what I've just done, which is knock the camera. It's a lot easier to make marks in certain directions. So if you turn the board underneath, it becomes easier to work. am really going to at some point need to get myself something like an optivisor, just so I can see this stuff properly. That might help. If I switch glasses, I'll be able to see a little bit better. That's better. Oh dear. There's a very slight difference in the prescription between those two pairs of glasses. And these are clear. These are clearer when I'm working like this, quite close to things. Okay. What you could always do is, well, apart from the fact that you obviously can buy wooden bobbins, and if you felt really adventurous, you could probably make one or two. You don't need to be very long. You could always spin them in an electric drill, small chisel, sandpaper. What you could always try with your plastic ones is a couple of things. Fishing weights attached to the bottom, or you can get, it's used in model railways, but it's called liquid gravity. Don't exactly know what it's made of, but it's a liquid that hardens in air, I think, which you can sort of paint onto things, and it sets, and it's really heavy, or really heavy. They use it for weighting down trains. And sort of painting into sort of odd sorts of cavities. So something like that might work. So we're going to see you using it on the stream soon, AD? Or have you finished all your braid work for the moment? Just outline some. Okay, well, that's another way of doing it. Find somebody else that. What you'll have to do is do a bit of barter, swap him some chain work for some bobbins. Yeah, okay. That'll be interesting to see. I've noticed this on some of the other reference pictures I was looking at in sort of old stone cottages. The really big stones are always at the bottom. Well, I suppose because they're easy to move that way, but really big stones at the bottom, and then they get more uniform as they go up. Hmm. Gotta be careful not to make them too much brick-like. It becomes very easy to do, does that. And if that's the centre of the window, let's do what might be a highlight down the edge here. It's nice doing, in some ways, doing a stone cottage because I don't have to worry too much about being straight with the lines, because you don't have very many straight lines on a stone cottage. Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's I never thought of getting that far because I'm assuming you probably won't want, but I was assuming you wouldn't want bobbins more than about 2 or 3 inches, and fairly thick wise. You could probably just stick them in a straight power drill, a dowel in a straight power drill, and up to about 3 inches. Much more than that, it'll probably start whipping around, but That sort of struck me as you could always do that if you wanted to have a go at making your own. Now then, one thing I've got to be careful of is I'm just putting a bar across this here, but I don't want to go across the centre, because if I do that, I'll make that centre area, there'll be more scraping there, it'll look lighter, so there'll be a light square in the middle, which I don't want. So you sometimes have to be a little bit careful about what you're doing. Your drill truck won't that wide. Oh, okay. Depends on what you're doing as well, because if you wanted a small shaft on the end of it, you could always drill a hole in a large dowel with a small dowel, then glue a small dowel into it, and then hold that with the drill. Again, you'd have to be careful, for the balance and things, but really careful, because at that point you've a mass on the end, it'll start whipping around. Try junior. You are being really junior, so I suggest you either grow up or I will assist you to move on. I'm just felt like putting some windows in. And that's come out a little bit whiter than I wanted it to do, but very much like with pyrography, if something's coming out, in this case lighter than I wanted, then what I'll have to do is lighten stuff around it. So that it doesn't look as light, but we'll deal with that. And I've got thatch hanging down over this one, so anybody that's watching that doesn't know what's going on here, what you're looking at is a craft called Scraperboard, or, well, don't exactly know what the craft would be called. Scraperboard is in principle a trade name, and it's a trade name for this particular medium. And what this is it's a layer of card with a layer of, I think it's porcelain clay, but it's certainly clay, layered over the top of it. It's a fairly thin layer, but it's a really smooth layer, and then that's been covered over with a layer of Indian ink. And once all that's dried, you end up with this. And what you then do is, using a sharp tool, and it doesn't have to be anything specific, razor blade, penknife if you really want to, scalpel blade, a pin, anything like that which will actually scratch through the Indian ink to the clay that's underneath. And what when you do scrape through like that, what you do is you reveal white, and then you create your image using more or less of that white. The thicker the line you scrape, the whiter something looks. The more scrapes in a certain area you have, the whiter something looks. If you cross pattern or you cross lines over, the more you cross them over, the whiter it looks. So it's all sorts of techniques involved like that. If you create little dots, for example, the more you put in a smaller area, the whiter it looks. So there's all sorts of ways of creating a likeness, and from that you create your image. And that's what's going on here. I am scraping a little bit tentatively in places, just to establish an image. You can correct Scraperboard. It's just a matter of putting more Indian ink down over the top of what you've scraped away, and or you can use like a marker pen to do the same thing. Certain marker pens will work better than others, so I understand. Not tried any yet. Of course, the best way is not to make any mistakes, but it happens. And if you can't work with the mistake, so you need to actually try and erase it, then Indian ink or black marker over the top. The only thing you have to ideally do is match the same colour of black, because if you don't, it stands out, it can be seen. And it depends on how large an area you're correcting as well. The larger the area, the more it can be seen. You can also colour this as well. You generally use an ink based colour. Certain inks are better than others. In fact, one of the manufacturers of board like this sells, I'll go specially formulated inks. It's probably just a standard ink, but they sell them as suitable for working on this sort of material. And all you do, of course, is just use maybe a paintbrush, something like that, a dryish sort of paintbrush. Paint over the white area, and it will, I'll say, stain that colour. You can then scrape over it again if you want to. Sort of, if I put green down, I can make it lighter green by scraping through the green marks, so some of the white shows through. Your eye naturally mixes the white and the green to make a lighter green. And that, interestingly, that might be something I'll try in the future, because if you wanted to do grass, it would be nice to have green grass. Don't necessarily think it's something to do over the whole of a picture. It's good for little highlights and little odd things like that which surprise your eye. There are other this board is made by a company called Estee, but there are boards made by other manufacturers. Some of them are quite thick boards as well. They're more like a hardboard backing, so they're quite thick, with the clay over the top and then the Indian ink. Can be a lot better to sort of hang on a wall by itself without framing. This sort of stuff really needs framing, just because it's like thin card. And let's put a door, or at least put the edge of the doorway in. That way, if I lose some of the marks that I've made, I will at least see where the major elements are. Not that I couldn't move them if I wanted to. I mean, there's no particular reason why the doorway has to be there. I am just vaguely following the reference image, just because it looked a nice layout. But that's about it. You know, it's got 3 windows, as is the reference. It's roughly the same, but that's about as accurate as it gets to a reference. Yeah, I'm just gonna mark. Well, yeah, let's put a little bit of marking in where the tops are. The whitish grey lines that you can see, which are gradually coming off as I rub my hand over this, that was just a transfer from a black and white copy of that reference image, just to give me an overall outline. It was a bit quicker than sitting down here trying to draw it onto the board to start with. So if I just mark, yeah, a few marks at this end here, a few marks here, and a few just down there. Like that, and yeah, I thought so. It's quite sort of dark down here. Okay, so I've just given myself some markers. Now if I lose all the white outline that's there, it won't bother me in the slightest. Okay, put some more of this thatch on. So with the thatching, what I'm just thinking I'm doing is just to apply a, well, kind of like a rough texture, and then I'll go back over afterwards and then create a little bit more texture over the top, lighten some areas, leave other areas so that it gets darker. Now I'm using diagonal strokes here because when I come to do this bit of the roof I'll be using vertical strokes. Therefore you'll be able to see the separation between them because they'll be at a completely different angle. Believe it or not, I'm being relatively sparse here as well. I said use a sharp tool. This one is getting a bit blunt, so I may actually either have to sharpen it or throw it away. I think I bought a fair few spares of this one, so I'm more likely to throw it away than sharpen it. It's not a particularly difficult thing to do, just a file of almost any kind will sharpen these tips. They're quite soft. Trying in doing this not to start and finish in the same place every time for every line, so varying the lengths of the line. If you start and finish in the same place, what happens is you create a line. It becomes visible, and doesn't always look good. Depends on what you're doing. I mean, obviously if it's meant to be a line and therefore you have, then that's fine. For example, there's you can just about see on the reference image, there's a cap of reeds which has got an edge, so I want to stop at that edge and actually sort of create that that texture, so it will be intentional that there's an edge there. Holocol, have a nice evening. I guess you're off then, Holocol. Have a good evening and enjoy whatever is left of it for yourself. Look forward to seeing you again at some point. Okay, what I'll do a little bit of an advert in that is if there's anybody watching that isn't following me, just a reminder that there is a follow button down below. If you're interested in following me, want to know about other crafts that I do and want to come back and see what I might get up to, then I would of course encourage you to push that button. If you don't want to, that's quite alright as well. It is free, by the way, in case it's not a subscription button. I'm not that good at in Twitch at the moment to have a subscription button, so a follow button is free. I think almost all of us broadcasters like it when people follow them. It's nice to know that people are enjoying the content that's being provided and enough to want to come back. I think, and I was going to say the more sensible of us also understand that if you don't want to follow, that doesn't mean you don't necessarily dislike what we're doing. It just means you don't want to follow. I'm going to say I also have a Twitter account if you want to follow Twitter so that you get notifications, because I do tweet when the stream goes live. My current favourite saying is I tweet when I go live, not when I have my breakfast. It seems an appropriate sort of thing to just let you know that I'm not actually one that does a lot of tweeting, and when I do, it's something relevant to art or the stream itself. So you can be. I will say just to be a little bit naughty, I'll say you can be relatively safe in following me on Twitter. I suppose these days, since I do tend to stream fairly regularly, I ought to put it in the on the profile page as well, just so that people can look. I shall get around to it, or even a square one of these days. It may end up I'll actually have to do that on stream, because when I'm on stream it seems to be about the only time I have time to do anything these days. Seems like Twitch app ate the message before that. Yeah, unfortunately it did. No, okay, yeah, it's a good idea. If you're feeling tired, go to bed. I definitely applaud that sort of action when you're feeling tired. I must admit, I actually hate doing something like watching a video or something on YouTube or a streamer and suddenly finding myself waking up to sort of streamer stopped or the video stopped 10 minutes ago. You always miss the interesting bits as well when that happens. It's a bit like sort of YouTube has a built-in sleep recognition, so it only plays the interesting bits when it detects you asleep. Time to test render your animation. Okay. Well, I guess unless you've got a powerful machine or you're using a simplified animation, that's your machine tied up for the next several hours. Now, this has got a couple of caps on it, so let's establish where which is kind of normal actually for thatched roofs. So I'm going to put a couple of caps on. So I'll just establish where the first one's going to be. So as it is in the reference, I want to leave some dark spots. So we'll have another one from, well, I don't care where it is on the reference. We'll have it about there. So that'll be the second. That's the top of the. Yeah, that's that one. So just below there. Okay, so that, yeah. Yeah, no, well, I didn't know that's what you were going to do. I gather that's how it often happens. You either use like stick figures or low res to see whether it looks right, and then you only do the final full resolution, full model render when you're actually done. You do realise we'll probably want you to sort of post it somewhere for your Reaper when you've done, so that we can all have a look at this. You can't tease too much like that. Okay, thank you. Where's the other? Oh, there it is. Well, you might be able to see that this knife I call it a knife, is creating sort of thicker scratches. You might notice just how white this sort of looks in comparison to what's underneath. So I kind of wanted this to be a little bit brighter than lower down, which is why I just switched to using this slightly larger tool for the moment. I may use it again elsewhere, but it's about picking the right tool for the job. You can do lots of things with, I won't say the wrong tool, but a tool where you know, it's like you can draw great big thick lines with a very thin pencil if you really want to. You just have to keep going backwards and forwards or tip it on its side, but it's a lot easier to use a thick pencil, that sort of thing. I'll be right back, Fear Reaper. Okay, I'll expect you back. I was just thinking, where's Baby Tears gone? Because I haven't seen her for a while, and she always calls me Hands when she sees these. Mind you, she always calls me Hands because she's not seen the face cam, but and all she ever sees is the hands. But you know, I could do this as a moonlit scene as well, rather than a daylit scene. We'll think about that. Okay, a lot of this is sort of falling off the edge of the roof. Right, has this tool finally given up the ghost? For a long time, and that's a saying, and it took me ages to understand that as a saying, giving up the ghost. I couldn't understand. I mean, I knew it meant something had stopped working, but for the life of me, I couldn't work out why. Until one day, I actually said it out loud, as opposed to hearing somebody else say it, and it was one of those, you know, facepalm moments, and it's kind of, oh, that is extremely obvious. Don't know why I couldn't see it before. You kind of go, yeah, well, I know I'm an idiot, but not to see that sort of thing. But it's amazing sometimes how you almost don't understand certain things until you either say them or you see them written down or things like that. You might be surprised at that these tools do get blunt relatively quickly as well. But it's a soft metal, and you are scraping through clay, which is an abrasive substance. So it took me a while to realise that as well, which is why I wondered why they were going blunt to start with, and then something else that clicked. Let me see if I've got another nib. Bear with me a second, I'm just going to have a look over this side. Okay, I do have some more somewhere, but as usual, I know I have some more somewhere. I've got a pack of them. Things like this always hide. You can find them all over the place. You can find them everywhere. You notice them, but when you want one, they vanish. I blame the elves. I suppose it could be the orcs as well, but elves seem more likely to do that sort of thing. I imagine orcs would probably eat them. And if you think I'm talking a lot of rubbish, you're right. Be right back, as they say. I'm just looking elsewhere in the studio where I might have kept spare tips, but I'm not finding them, and I'm not going to go tearing the place around to look for them tonight on stream. I will deal with it as it is. And of course, immediately after the stream, I'm going to find them straight away. Yeah. Oh, I'm like that. I'm like that. And it'll be somewhere obvious. Sorry, knocking. It'll be somewhere obvious when I find these. Like they'll be on the desk in front of me. He says, looking at the desk in front of me, just in case. Because no doubt that's precisely what will happen. I'd just like to replace this tip. I can deal with it if I don't. On worst cases, I've got a scalpel. But I got, I think it was a pack of 100 fine tips, and these ones as well. Because I thought, you know, if they're selling them in packs of 100, it means that they wear out. So I got a spare. expensive, you know. They're, I guess probably a few p each, but you know, it's going to bug me as well until I find them. Having just decided not to look, if that's precisely what I'm still doing. I have the feeling that they're just going to be right nearby. I did originally keep everything together when I got the Scraperboard stuff, and I've even still got the box. I could use a scalpel, I could use a dentist drill for that matter, but because there's some really fine pointed ones. No, I'll give up, forget about it. I shall carry on with this one. It will just take a little bit more effort, that's all. Excuse me. Oh yes, that's what I was going to do with this. I was going to yeah, start fine work. Now why are you sticking your tongue out at me, Fear Reaper? Other than to mean that you're back, I guess, and it's a really strange way of saying I'm back. Or do you always go up to people and stick your tongue out at them? So I want to create a shadow. I might eventually put some scrapings in that area because it will, at the moment I'm just leaving it black. I'm just creating like a shadow there. but for the minute we'll just leave it black. That's kind of the edge of where the reeds come. The edges have been cut, and they're generally cut with an undercut, so that water comes down the top and drips off drips off. Well, it's kind of, you get an angle cut like that with the roof coming. Water runs down, then drips off, and as this edge wears, you've still got that undercut, so it drips off. If they did it the other way, it sort of gets into the ends of the reeds and starts working its way up. So they generally undercut them. There you go. Thatched roof technology explanations at the same time as art and crafts and Scraperboard. And you're getting value for your money, you guys. Oh wait, you're not paying. You're definitely getting value for your money. I love monochrome artwork, or working in monochrome. It's yeah, well, this is going to be quirky. Whether it's Scraperboard, which is quite an interesting medium for black and white, whether it's the pyrography, or whether it's the airbrushing, which you guys haven't seen yet, but there's something really well, for me anyway, there's something really interesting about working in black and white. And even with airbrushing, it actually is usually black and white. It's if you're working with white as the main colour, you generally, with airbrushing at least, you generally do that on black. But if you're working with any other colour, you work on a white background. For monochrome work. And it can actually be, well, it depends on, generally speaking, if you're working on a white background, you'll paint the white background white first. Otherwise, one of the ways in which you work with monochrome airbrushing is you'll spray white, and then you'll spray the colour, then you'll spray the white around to tighten up edges, make them sharper, change shades and things like that. So whilst you're working with a single colour, you're actually working with a single colour and white. And if you don't spray your background with that white first, it's generally a different colour. It stands out like a sore thumb. It's a bit like that if you work with white on black. You'll use black to sharpen up the edges, but if you haven't got an exact match to your black background, it stands out like a sore thumb. I have no black ink, so I'm not about to be doing any of that on this, but just another interesting fact for you there. But I get really fascinated by it, how with your sort of just one colour you can create so many shades that you can, I mean, I know it's daft because you get black and white photographs which are loads of shades of white, but I'm just fascinated by it and producing it. We really want to see the airbrushing. I can show you some airbrushing, but I can't show you me doing the airbrushing. I just have nowhere to put the stuff that's sat on the bench over there. I can't even do any. It's not that I don't want to show you, it's I can't show you at the moment. I would quite like to. And I need some practice. I'm out of practice. It's one of those skills that you do have to keep practicing. I've had breaks, short breaks of a month before when I was able to do it, and it's amazing what you find that you can't do in brush control that you could do before. You just lost the memory of doing it. It's like I'd love to do some of the engraving as well. I mean, I've got two relatively expensive compressors sat doing nothing. I'd really like to use them for something. About the only thing my big compressor gets used for at the moment is blowing up the car tyres occasionally. And given that you can get little tiny compressors to do that, just go down to the garage. It's a bit expensive. In fact, the last thing I used it for was spray painting the fence. Which was there's a lot quicker than doing it by hand, but it did remind me I need to get a bigger spray gun for doing that. Since I was only using a touch-up gun, and they don't hold much paint as touch-up guns. So I could do about a panel before needing to top it up, and that's a bit of a pain in the neck. Mind you, AD, you could say the same thing about you. I mean, I want to see your airbrushing. We all know you've been doing some. Well, we all know. I know you've been doing some. Some of the people on stream here probably also know you've been doing some. And you're talking of things which remind me of something else entirely. Hello, Theme Hospital. Nice to see you. Yeah, I happen to be aware you've ordered a nice long hose. And if you stop pushing for a moment, your compressor will turn off and you'll be able to speak. Getting the PC out there. You can get 30 metre long USB 2 powered USB 2 repeaters. Ah dear, it's alright, AD, just teasing you a little bit. Spent 3 hours stuck in a queue on the M4. Other than that, you're fine. But as long as the car's air conditioned and you get enough petrol, I've spent many an hour stuck on the M4, the M3, the M25, the M1, the M6. I admit it used to be nicer a few years ago to be stuck in a queue, because the car I have has a television in it, actually built into the dashboard, and it's an analog television, so it doesn't work anymore. But a few years ago, when we still had analog television, I could sit in a queue, put the television on, because it only worked when you were stationary, and watch television in queues. Air conditioning, because I was working and driving about, I quite often used to have a flask of either cold or warm, depending whether it's winter or summer, drink in it, just to drive, because otherwise it got expensive in motorway service stations. So I could sit on the motorway, cup of coffee or cold drink, cold orange juice, something like that, watching television, air conditioning going. That's quite a nice time, really, and getting paid for it. 3 meters and spiral. Yeah, it doesn't tend to stretch very far when it's spiral. Yeah, got the. Actually, the bit that always disappointed me with the television was, and still does it a little bit, is there's no auxiliary input to the screen. Otherwise, I'd have plugged in something like a PlayStation and been able to sit in the car in a queue playing games. That would have been good. I've seen family over in Bristol, yeah. M40 closed. M20. No, the M25 isn't. I once left. Where was it? I always avoid the M25 Sunday afternoons, Monday mornings, Friday afternoons, and I've never been near it on a Saturday, but because I'm trying to remember. I remember leaving a place just north of the south of the M25. If you go to the south of the M25, and just north of there, I can't remember the place that was there, but it may come to me, but it doesn't matter. I hit the M25 basically its most southern point, coming round north to go to the M1 to head north up to Yorkshire. I hit that M25 at 11 o'clock in the morning on a Friday. It was 7 o'clock at night by the time I hit the M1 heading north, and it was something like about 2 o'clock in the morning when I got home, because to get to Watford took about 5 hours on the Friday from 7 o'clock. It was yeah, real long horse. Yeah, I was going to say, one thing is they don't start that often with an airbush, but you'd be surprised actually how much air you go through. If you do get hold of something like that, don't get airbrush hose. Either get sort of normal quarter-inch, I think it's quarter-inch hose that you might use on a tyre blower up thingy machine, off standard on the big compressors. Or what you can get is plastic pneumatic tubing. We like push-on fittings are easier, and that the pneumatic tubing is relatively cheap. That's how I connect the big compressor down in the garage to up here in the studio. I've got about 30 meters of pneumatic tubing. I think it's 1/8 tubing. It's a little bit restrictive, but it's not too bad for the pressures that I run up here and the flow rates I run. But it's a heck of a lot cheaper than either braided compressor hose, or certainly it's a heck of a lot cheaper than airbrush hose. That stuff is expensive, even with the fittings on the end. Ended up driving round Oxford, Aylesbury and Hemel Hempstead. Yeah. Mind you, Hemel on a Friday. Well, it's a Sunday, isn't it? I was going to say Hemel on a Friday, but it's a Sunday. Don't know what it's like on a Sunday. I'd not been down to Hemel Hempstead on a Sunday. Used to go down there frequently, driving around the magic roundabout. That is one weird roundabout. I think the last time I went round, that improved it a little bit. The signposted which way to go round it more. But you used to be able to. It was like the other one. You could used to be able to drive round that roundabout any way that you liked, in any direction. For anybody that doesn't know and can't be bothered to looking it up, it's one big roundabout, and I think there's either 6 or 8 little mini roundabouts around the outside. And you can go round the mini roundabout, so you can go round the big roundabout, but if you go round the mini roundabouts, you're going the wrong way around the big roundabout. And if you go the wrong way around the big roundabout, or you go the right way around the big roundabout, you're going the wrong way around the mini roundabouts, and it's interesting. You have to have your wits about you going around those things. Yeah, yeah, definitely. It wouldn't be a problem at all. The I mean, in theory, I mean, with an airbrush, you're really not pulling that much air, so it's not too much of a problem. Anyway, um, when I run the drill off it, I am pulling a fair bit of air. But generally speaking, quarter-inch hose it only becomes a problem to people using compressed air in industrial processes, and then they tend to use things like half-inch. But no, there's no problem with using quarter-inch hose up to your regulator. You probably find you can get a quarter-inch fitting for your regulator as well, if it hasn't got one in already. She'll save you having to put a quarter-inch to 1/8 adapter in if it isn't already there. Right, this is becoming a bit of a pain. Bubbles the monkey! Welcome to the studio this evening. It's not so much the pressure, AD, it's the flow rate. The tubing presents a resistance to the flow of air. So you get more flow with more pressure for any given well, if you flat out air on the airbrush, the higher the pressure, the more flow you'll get, but you're not really using it a great deal, and you tend to use it for short bursts. It's restriction really. It's what will happen if you were drawing a lot of air is that the pressure drops basically. The hose acts like a regulator in that it can't get through fast enough, so the pressure drops at one end to the other, and it means that you get inconsistent air, because as you push air down, and you won't find it with a quarter-inch, if you push for air you get a burst and it goes and you can actually hear the air slow down because the pressure falls away. Then it's kind of tricky, because if you push the air whilst you're on your work, you'll get a burst of paint and then you'll get less. So you kind of got to work with it somehow. Actually, the easiest way of if you ever have that situation is push the air only, wait while it stabilises, and then let the paint through. But it proves interesting. But no, you won't have any problems with a quarter-inch at all. When I'm running the drill turbine, I can. It takes about a minute and a half to flatten a 25-litre tank to the point where the compressor starts up again. So I'm drawing. I'm running at about 50 psi, but I forgot what the flow rate is. It's supposed to be 30 psi at a given flow rate. And that flow rate's about 10 times what the airbrush is, and so that's where it comes in, because your psi is what's the pressure at the airbrush when you're drawing air out of it, is what you're after, and the hose has to be large enough to support that. It's a measurement that comes into things like free air delivery. You see that on compressors as well. Free air delivery, it's at a given pressure where it's a wide open valve. If the compressor can maintain that pressure at that valve point? It's a trade-off then, AD. I mean, if you quarter-inch hose, it just have the fittings already on, so you could just put an adapter on it, or just a small section of hose. And in actual fact, unless you're actually mounting your water trap solid, it possibly would be better with a small hose section. If you're using pneumatic tube, you just put a 1/8 fitting on the end of it rather than a 1/4 fitting. So don't worry about it too much. I wouldn't, as I say, unless you're solidly mounting it, I wouldn't bother changing out the fitting, thinking about it, because the heavy quarter-inch hose will have a tendency to pull and knock it over if you touch the hose and things like that. So I wouldn't bother too much. Bubbles, yeah. I did say hello, didn't I, Bubbles? Welcome. Scraperboard. I'm going to try using my scalpel, just because this thing has annoyed me. I need to find the... No, that one has annoyed me. I need to find the tips. But this scalpel blade actually is finer. So this will do the job for tonight. This scalpel is blunt anyway, so I say blunt. I could still quite easily cut myself with it, but I'm not bothered about blunting it by doing this. If I was doing airbrushing and I was cutting a mask, I'd have changed this blade, but it just gets, at the moment, it just gets used for general purpose cutting things like opening boxes. Whilst blades are not that expensive, they're also not that cheap. I tend not to change them unless I have to. So how's the big fella with the sword going? I believe you were ironing it last time we talked, Bubbles Debunky. Okay, just looking at the links you put, Eddie. It looks either like a stool or you're about to do some 3D printing. One or the other. And the scout. Let's have a look at the scout sign. Not sure I want to go scouting. I mean, you've got... Well, I suppose there's... Yeah. Is that meant to be a girl? Because it sort of looks like you intend to use long hair. But I'm not sure I'd want to go scouting. Not with those ghosts that are there. Don't think I like the idea of ghosts scouting. Oh, I understand that one, Bubbles. I've been doing pyrography for the past week, and although the pyrographic machine is relatively low powered, it creates a small zone of heat which I'm right over the top of. And now when I turn to doing Scraperboard, the heat's gone, and we had rain today, and it's been cool, and it's even cool enough that my air conditioner's turned the compressor off, and it's just blowing air now. I've not used a scalpel to do this with, but I am quite. It's created some really fine lines. So I may use it again. Well, I probably will use it again. And what character might that be, Obama the Nude? Because I'm not about to look. I also don't appreciate you just posting links without asking. That's extremely rude. Sorry, I was just thinking then, AD, about you have to be careful how you say that in a way, don't you? But yes, it looks good. As I said, not sure I'm keen on the ghosts, but I'm sure AD's going to do something about those shortly. Mind you, there again, maybe that's intentional. I'm sure it would get a lot of kids quite excited to know that there might be ghosts around. I'm not sure whether I believe in ghosts or not, but I can believe why people believe in them. Yeah, there's something sort of primevally sort of scary about certain environments. I used to, when I was young, I used to cycle to a place where I worked, and coming back in winter, especially when it was dark, I used to cycle past. Well, it was an unlit road which was about 2.5 miles long, and at one point it goes past a wood, and the wood's right up against the road, and it was always kind of an eerie place. Great during the day, and once you're away from the wood it wasn't too bad, but never liked going past that wood. Never liked. No, I didn't say I wasn't keen on scouting. I'm guessing that probably attracts quite a few people, the fact that girls and boys both go scouting together. No, I was just kind of, whilst I know, and as you said, I know that they do, it's it just still it's a long time. Yeah, I don't do scouting, don't get involved with it, and when back then when I would have been, it wasn't. It was separate, so you kind of it doesn't enter the consciousness. Um, no, I was. The only other thing I said, of course, when you said scouting is for girls. Of course, was there quite a bit of controversy at one point when something to do with a song, Scouting for Girls, where people thought it meant something different or took it to mean something different. Good luck, Fear Reaper. Let's hope that render works okay for you. Since this creates such a fine lines, I'm going to just go back over this area here, because it will just sort of fill in some of the gaps between a little bit and make it look a little bit more solid. Quite pleased at the way it looked over there. Yep, so daisy. Maybe I won't bother looking for those tips. I know where my scalpel blades are, I don't have a problem finding those. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say something earlier, Eddie, and then I completely forgotten. I was wondering how the train set was going. Because I think kind of triggered a little bit of an interest there again. White Eagle 76, good evening. Welcome to the stream. Just in case, I would prefer English if you wouldn't mind, although I am quite happy with what you've just said then. That's close enough to start with at least. I do understand what that means. Right. So we've got a bit of thatching in there. I'll do a bit. We'll get a bit more work done on thatching again later. You resisted buying. And I don't. I'm guessing it wasn't in your way. You just wanted to make sure it was. You needed to move it just so that you could have another look and think about maybe getting it out a little bit more and adding a bit to it and running an engine or two on it. Ah dear. Yeah, we'll tempt you into it one of these days. Well, yeah, I can't say anything. I haven't got room to put one. At least you've got one. I haven't. Right, so we've got an end cap on the roof as well. Let's so I can use the other one for this. I haven't decided whether this is a day or a night scene, and ultimately it probably won't matter. There wouldn't be a lot of difference. You just might get a little bit more highlighting with a moon scene actually than you would do with a day scene, but we'll get you there, AD. We'll get you there. 350 frames. That's about 15 seconds. Oh, you running 50 frames per second? I say 50. Might be 60. Yeah, 50. Unusual, but I was assuming 25 frames per second. You'll have to get a rendering farm, Fear Reaper. It's got a bit of decoration like yeah. Now I've got to remember to do this straight down. Because that's the way the roof comes down in the background of a cottage like this. It's an L shape. And it goes I suppose I should have done it first. It goes behind this front thatch. So if I'd have thought about it, I'd have done it first, and then when I go over this one, or when I went and did this one, I will cover up the edge. There we go. We're getting there. 24 frames. Oh, you're doing it to film standard. Yeah, 5 seconds. Oh, 5 seconds per frame is not bad. Not bad. don't think that looks too bad. It looks a bit like, it almost looks a bit like somebody's hairstyle gone a bit weird at the moment, but and I guess on frame you're not seeing the different angles, like this thatch is coming this way. The thatch is really too fine at this stage. It needs to be thickened up a little bit, but thickening it up will be it'll go too white unless I'm really careful. So what I'll do is probably just add some highlighting. I mean, this is, if you look at old thatch, which is, I suppose you could treat this as being a brand new thatch, in which case you see the straw or the reed more. But having said which, I've hung this over the edge, so that's kind of suggestive of an old thatch. It's sort of, the top layer mingles together, and the reference picture shows it as well. It sort of doesn't go mouldy as such, but it's kind of like it well, this has got moss on it. Moss and stuff grows over it, so you get sort of rough patches rough texture rather than actual straw or reed marks. So this is, a little bit perhaps too much lines, but we'll see how it goes. Parties is here. Welcome to the studio this evening. Nice to see you again. Thank you very much. A new art form. Oh, sorry, a new craft to you. Scraperboard. I don't think you'll have seen it before. But this is a black board. You scrape the surface away, you're revealing porcelain clay underneath, which reveals white, and the image is built up from the white, and the width and quantity of scrapings in any particular area determine how bright something is, which is why this looks whiter than the window frame, for example. Okay, I'm going to put that down there. Scraperboard, and it is technically is a trade name, but don't really know what else to call it. There is a couple of companies make at least two big companies make it, and they one calls it Scraperboard, B-O-A-R-D, the other calls it Board, B-O-R-D. They're slightly different to each other, but essentially what it is a backing board. In this particular case it's like thick card. In the other company's case it's more like a thin wood sheet. Spread over the top of that is a layer of clay, generally a porcelain or a white clay, and that's spread and rolled really well, thinnish shall we say, but rolled really flat. And then over the top of that is applied a layer of generally black Indian ink, although you can get it without any ink on at all and spread your own, so you could do a blue one if you wanted to, or that sort of thing. What you then do is use basically any sharp tool, and you can get some that are specially made sort of for the job. They look a bit like pen nibs, so like this one which has gone blunt. I'll move a bit closer so it's more in focus. So it's just a thin piece of metal with a sharp point on the end of it. You can get others like this which are a sharp point but not quite as sharp. And this one looks a bit like a rake. That you can't see. Let me see if I just refocus that a little bit. zoom in then. There you go. You see, it's like a rake. So this sort of produces 4 lines side by side. And there are a few others, but basically anything sharp. I've been using a scalpel this evening, which is a blunt one, but the point's sharp enough to do this sort of thing with. Then really you create your image however you like. You can create cartoon styles with great big thick white lines instead of black lines. You're working white on black rather than the other way around. So you can draw cartoons if you like, which are just outlines. You can do this sort of style, which if you remember from the pyrography, I like working in a photorealistic style, so this sort of thing suits me. But it's what you're doing here is I'm creating lots of fine scratches, so that I'm just trying to focus it so you can see that it's about that. Yeah, it'll look sort of hairy if you see what I mean, but the more scratches you get in an area, or the wider the scratches, the whiter it becomes. I prefer lots in a small area because that way I can control it a lot better. You might have seen the moon's Earth Rising, I might have shown you that, and that's another one where it gets lighter as you scratch at it. And that's basically it. It's just a case of scratching away the black however you want to do it. If you like just pure black and white, you can do pure black and white, and I scratch, but you can do I won't do it. Instead of scratching, you can sort of like almost pick little bits out, so it's a bit like a dot technique, and you can make bigger dots and smaller dots. You can put them closer together, further apart, like newspapers do, and you can create texture that way. There are some, if you want to see some really good Scraperboard stuff, again, YouTube is your friend in that respect. There are some artists out there where when you look at a Scraperboard, it looks like a photograph until they zoom in and you can see the individual scratches on like a person's face, and it's almost like you can see the individual pores on a face. They've gone to that much detail with little tiny scratches. I'm not sure I have enough patience to do that. I like things to move a little bit quicker, but I also don't have the skill to do that yet. So it's, I'm guessing when I do have the skill to do that, I'll have the patience to go with it. Well, I'm not sure it's an unusual technique, shall I say, because that's how it's this sort of techniques is how it's done. But it's an unusual sort of craft, I suppose. There's not a lot of people doing it that I've seen. I don't see a lot of it on YouTube, or I don't think I've seen anybody do it on Twitch yet. So I guess after tonight I can say I've seen somebody else doing it because I'm watching my own stream, but first time I've seen it on Twitch. And if you're wondering about the gloves, by the way, they're cotton gloves. They do two jobs. One is keep finger marks off, so skin oils will create finger marks on here, and if you brush the dust away, it will stick to the finger marks, and you have to then brush it away a little bit more. So it takes a bit more effort to keep the board clean. And I like little effort. It actually, incidentally, it does make it a bit easier, being cotton gloves, to actually brush stuff away as well, because it doesn't stick to your fingers either. But the other job of them is I don't accidentally scratch the board with a fingernail or a ring that I'm wearing. For example, I'm wearing at least one. Not very easy to do, but fingers occasionally can scratch. It's quite thick actually and quite hard to scratch. So it's not something that you just touch and you get a scratch there. People who were watching earlier would have seen me trying to use one of these tools before I decided it was too blunt. It looks sharp, it feels sharp, but I couldn't actually get it to go through the black layer without applying more pressure than I wanted. And when I did that, I got a wider line, therefore it was lighter than I wanted it to be. So it's not that delicate, but why take the risk? You know, the gloves provide so much other benefit that I might as well wear them. Yeah. I love black and white stuff. Patty's is here. Patty's is here. So you know, this monochrome stuff, as I said, with the pyrography. And I mentioned earlier about airbushing, but you're not going to see that just yet, I'm afraid. Despite Adi really wanting me to do it. Maybe when we see your airbushing, Adi, we'll see. See if I can manage to do something at least one stream. But it really does mean me moving lots of stuff around to be able to fire up the airbrush. Anyway, guys and gals, it's after 10:30. Time I stop for this evening. It's been great having you all around. The usual advert is going to come now, and that is just to remind anybody that's watching who isn't following and would like to. I'd appreciate you doing so. That way Twitch will email you, or if you have Turbo, I think it will SMS message you as well. Or if you've got iOS, you get the app, it'll chortle at you when I go live. On the other hand, you can follow me on Twitter, and I tweet when I go live, not when I have breakfast, so you might prefer that. On the other hand, if you'd just like to try and catch me when I next go live, which will be tomorrow evening at 8 PM in the UK, 1900 hours GMT, or 2.5 hours earlier than the time it is now, but tomorrow. So that'll save you looking it up on Google. You showed some, but you didn't actually show you doing it, AD. I mean, I can show some. I can show a not very good elephant, and I can show a not bad sepia toned western town. So I can do that, and then we're even. So remind me tomorrow if you want to see them, AD, or next time you're on stream. I'll show you those as well if you want. But thank you, everybody. It's been great having you around. I'll hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye bye.